Welcome to another podcast, Charlie and Andrei show.
Yeah, this is Andrei Antonescu from our usual studio in Rockville, Maryland. So you know how we usually talk about things like history and like philosophy and linguistics and things like that. Well, we thought we'd take a bit of a different turn this episode, although it does kind of connect a little bit to our earlier sci-fi kind of interests in like Star Wars and Dune and things like that, and especially like Asimov. So we will be talking about something that has undoubtedly become a big part of your life in recent years, and you can't get away from it, AI. So we this is a topic that's kind of been long overdue. It's very much both a buzzword, but also like a legitimately hot topic and very relevant to today's world. Needless to say, um, so I work in tech, and yeah, I do have some exposure, of course, to various AI agents. When we were thinking about doing this, I initially thought I would go into like the details of like how it works and all the technical jargon, but I realized that's not really what we want to do. I'm sure there's many other people out there that are probably doing the same thing and much uh, better than we probably will. So we won't bore you with that. We want to delve more into the philosophical and ethical considerations of AI, how it impacts our lives, if it's actually thinking, what are the implications for the future, and how it relates to the idea of consciousness and things like that. So of course it's been around in as an idea in sci-fi for centuries at this point. I mean, you could argue even going back to like Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, and that's people creating, an intelligent being that, by hand. And, heck, it goes back to like old ancient myths in some ways, arguably. And then, later in the era of, like Jules Verne and like H.G. Wells, you get more into like these kind
And
of
Samuel Butler,
questions,
right? Samuel
robotics.
Butler.
Yeah. So, and of course, yeah, Star Trek expanded on it. Isaac Asimov with like I, Robot and the law of robotics, of course. Um, then things like Blade Runner, like a big cult classic film from the 80s. Animes like Ghost in the Shell, touch on this. So this has become like a big thing. Heck, there's even examples of like more um, perhaps emotionally poignant and relevant examples like the movie Her, for example, as someone falls in love with like an AI agent on his computer and a laptop, which is actually kind of becoming a thing, uh, interestingly enough for some people, which I think is a little bit sad, but who knows, maybe it might be more common in the future.
But there's even sad aspects. Like speaking of her, it reminds me,
Yeah.
like you said, Blade Runner. There's
Yeah.
that parallel, like Roy's final speech, that artificial intelligence guy. He's like tears in the rain, and he's like has all these emotions. So it's not just like love emotion. I mean, like if AI has consciousness, there would be a huge range of emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's what it does. It's not so much what is happening, from its perspective, if you could even say it has a perspective, but what humans get from it, like the illusion it creates. It's kind of, and this relates to the whole like Turing test concept, of course, if it can fool a person into kind of thinking that it is indeed thinking and, or that it's an actual person on the other end, or like, convincingly a person. So that, it's the impression it makes on people and how that affects us. That's where we're at. And that can be surprisingly powerful, So where should we start?
Well, we could start like just briefly, like you like you said, we've done like podcasts on like Foundation and other sci-fi, and of course, Dune has like its own
Yeah,
sort of artificial
we'll get to
intelligence.
that one eventually once we
Yeah,
read
we're
it.
not going to really talk about it a lot. I was reading this book. I started reading it actually at your house a few weeks ago. Yuval Noah Harari,
Nexus.
Nexus: A Brief History of Informational Networks from the Stone Age to AI. We don't have to get too much into it. It's just to kind of spark some conversations, and obviously we've used a lot of different AIs from like ChatGPT to Grok to Claude, and then that French one, I forgot what it's called.
Well,
Anyway, yeah, we've used
are
a
you thinking
fair
of
amount.
Claude or Anthropic AI, or what do you mean?
There's a French one that's different from them, but in any case,
Yeah,
it's
it's the Chinese
Mistral.
ones that they
Oh,
got to
Le
watch out
Chat,
for.
Le Chat.
Okay, the cat.
Yeah. um, but it's interesting, like you said, it seems like in some sense they have passed the Turing test, or even that Chinese room problem that you and I talked about with some friends in Annapolis like years ago, like where you have like a perfect output and a real understanding, and like computers just manipulate those symbols without necessarily understanding it. It's like you're sitting in a room, somebody gives you a paper with Chinese sentences like scripts, but you don't know the Chinese at all, and you have this giant instruction book that says, like, if you see this symbol, then give back this symbol, and then you follow the rules perfectly, and the people outside the room think you speak Chinese impeccably. But you
Yeah,
never understood a single word. You only match symbol to symbol, which seems to be like kind of what AI is doing.
yeah, that's a fascinating analogy, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you guys don't
Uh,
know, like the Turing test was developed by Alan Turing back in like I guess like the 50s, was it?
right.
A test to see whether some, artificial intelligence or some kind of, whether it be a robot or a machine of any kind, can convincingly fool a human into thinking that it is interacting with a human on the other end of the machine. And back then it
But now
was,
you can't really tell. That's the
yeah,
problem.
back then it wasn't really possible in as much as it is today, because people didn't really interact with machines that way. And I guess people were thinking more in terms of like an actual robot, like a walking thing that can look like a human and act like a human. But that wasn't the only thing he was talking about. We mostly interact with AI in form of like text and sometimes voice. And in that respect, it is obviously easier to fool a human because um, you're just getting the text, like you're not necessarily looking at a person. But now that you mix that with like AI generated like video and deep fakes and things like that, you can convincingly fool someone that a video of another person is a real person when it's actually not. That's another way to kind of, you know,
Right, right.
pass the Turing test, so to speak.
Yeah, don't worry what's inside the machine. Just judge the intelligence by behavior, not like
Right.
by consciousness. And that's
Exactly.
what's crazy is that machines can basically pass as acting like humans on a keyboard. And that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, obviously like we all probably use like ChatGPT, Gemini, all this stuff. And um, well, see, what angle should I come at this with? Um,
I
well,
mean, I
yeah,
could jump.
sorry, what's
No,
up?
no. I mean, if you want me to, I can jump into some philosophical stuff, or if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead with that angle more. Yeah, let's take on the
Yeah, I
philosophical
mean,
side of it.
like we were talking about consciousness, and like we said, we don't really want to get into like the details because again, there's probably things that can summarize it better with the visual images and things like that about how artificial intelligence, as we currently understand it, like functions. But we were thinking, like, what if at some point, or even if right now, uh, AI has consciousness? In fact, Andrei shared an article with me from the New Yorker that was
Right.
talking about consciousness, and consciousness, of course, is like a deeply complex philosophical what if question on many levels. Like, how did consciousness arise? What is consciousness? How can we define it? Are apes conscious? Like, should we give them habeas corpus rights because they're conscious? I mean, like, just to prep for this, I worked on looking into Aristotle's on the soul, like de
Mm,
anima. And Aristotle, I mean, he has like an interesting conception of what like the soul is. It's like the psyche, or sorry, I'm mixing Latin and Greek, but peripsyche. And
right.
he says like there's three levels of a soul. There's the nutritive generative soul, that's the phytikon. The locomotive soul, that's the kinetikon, which is like kinesis, right? And then there's the rational cognitive soul, and that's the logistikon. And so like the nutritive soul, that's like in plants, it's about growing. Of course, humans and animals have it as well, but they don't move a lot. Now, there are some that are kind of in the middle, like Venus flytraps, which do
Sure.
move
Right.
based on certain stimuluses, but basically they're just life support capacity. And then you also have the sensitive and locomotive soul that he defines. That's like what dogs have, animals have. You have a desire, movement. They're moving around. You can see emotion even in dogs and monkeys and things like that. They're aware of their environment in a way that you can't really say from Aristotle's perspective that plants are. And then finally, you have the rational cognitive soul that's very unique to humans, according to Aristotle. Now, granted, this copy I have here of snow monkeys, they seem to be somewhat cognitively aware in Japan,
They're
which are
having a
beautiful
good
little
time.
monkeys. They almost have like their own culture that evolves over time. But you have intellectual abilities, like abstraction. You can deliberate. You can grasp universals. And you have like this will. And what's unique about Aristotle is that like St. Thomas Aquinas, which is big in Catholic and a lot of Christian theology, adopts this and says like, well, you know, and I was reading poetically Dante's Paradiso. I have a copy of the Inferno here
Mm,
that we've also done a podcast
sure.
on different topics, but like um the idea in in Aquinas's philosophy and the poetic manifestation of it in Dante Alighieri is that you partake in the spirit of like the angelic beings, and like God is rationality, logos, like the beginning of John. Just speaking from like a purely like philosophical perspective, that is kind of like the basic Catholic and other Protestant denominations believe that like humans partake in the logos, and we're like on a line between animals or the angelic beings and animals. And it's like when you give to your base instincts, you become just an animal, and when you go into the logos of God, then you become like a cognitive angelic being, so to speak. This is just the Dante and Aquinas theology, and of course, it's influenced like European thinking for a long time. But then the question becomes like, what happens if AI is kind of the opposite? Because in evolution, evolutionary theory, you'd see like, well, first you're like nutritive, then you have locomotion, then you can gain cognitive abilities. But it seems like first AI is starting with cognitive abilities, or at least representing those. What happens if it gains sensation
It's going
and
backwards. It's starting from
yeah, it's almost like a
our
reverse
endpoint.
evolution, which is
Yeah.
fascinating. But if it gains those abilities and it's conscious, one thing I asked you, and I don't even know what the answer to this question would be. I would imagine if it gains consciousness, don't we have a right to or a duty to protect it? I would say yes. But then what I don't like have the answer to is like, how do we know that? Because it's passing the Turing test, right?
Well,
And it's
we're
passing.
still we're still a ways away from true AGI or artificial general intelligence. But like Sam Altman and the OpenAI guys are working on it, and Qualcomm.
But that article you shared seemed to suggest that AI has like a type of consciousness, and that's
Well,
what's crazy.
yeah, it's interesting. Like they seem to think that a lot of like the basic leg work is done, and it's all about kind of refining it to the point where it gets to that point. But I don't know. Like again, we can't pretend we're experts here, and we don't know like a lot of the inner workings. But like, yeah, it's hard to say whether these kind of messianic AI figures like Altman or Amadei and whatnot are being complete, if they're a little bit disingenuous and trying to hype it up for the sake of hype and investment and whatnot, and how far we truly are. Because a lot of it, this was in the early days, was more about just taking information and cobbling it together and spitting it out. It works kind of based on these tokens and like based on the prompt, the likelihood of that of a token, like a discrete word or idea, like kind of matching, the prompt within the parameters of the prompt and the controls that are put in place. And it kind of just, it weighs each word based on a certain probability. So there's a certain kind of mechanistic action to it. Whether or not this kind of, is analogous to how human brains operate, that's a fascinating, that's something that as this article discusses, certain neuroscientists have been kind of wrestling with, seeing like how I read actually some books on how the brain works, like this one, Incognito, Secret Lives of the Brain, and more recently one on the suggestible brain. It discusses how like a lot of when we make up our mind about a certain, you know, um, decision or even something to say, our mind is already made up beforehand before we're even consciously aware
Mm.
of it. So there's something kind of going on in our brains, comparing information and weighing it, comparing options. But before we're aware of it, it just kind of has some fascinating implications about free will and all this stuff. But that's a whole nother discussion. But how does this compare to these LLMs and other AI models? It's hard
It's
to
fair
really
to
say.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think it's fair to say like AIs don't really have appetite. They don't have pain or pleasure insofar as
Yes,
we
yes.
know. I think if we started picking up evidence of that, then it becomes our duty to try to like
Oh,
protect them. I mean,
protect and support it. Well, okay. So what about its duty to support us? Because the reason we make AI is mostly to help humanity and support us and do things for us that humans don't want to do. Obviously, that has implications
yeah.
about taking jobs, and that's a whole thing we can kind of get into.
I
But
mean, one thing that I thought about, there's this famous case from 1775 in England. I mean, you say jobs we don't want to do. It was about Africans in England. And it's a famous case in England. It says that in the history of Anglo-Saxon common law, there is no room for slavery. Um, and some people hypothesize that's the reason that the American colonies rebelled, is because Britain was going to get rid of the slave
yeah,
trade. But
that's
I mean, like, I hear what you're saying. I mean, these are tools. Like as of now, I don't see proof that like they have like a desire, or like they seem to have perception, but without like qualia.
well, yeah,
They respond to stimuli, but the stimuli are based on like policies and models that
yeah.
the AI.
A lot of it's like approximations or
Yeah,
emulations rather than actual, thinking from what I understand. Although interestingly, the guy in the article was like a big skeptic of the idea of it being anywhere near the ability to think, but now he's like slowly coming around.
that's what was fascinating. He said
Yeah.
like a month ago or a year ago when they published this other New Yorker article that he mentioned there, he's like, I didn't fully believe it. But I
Yeah,
mean,
because they
like,
call them stochastic parrots or whatnot, right?
yeah, exactly. Which is it's a funny phrase. I like
Right.
it. But Aristotle says like to be rational and cognitive, you need to have abstraction. And I guess the capacity of abstraction is like kind of a nebulous thing because abstraction is abstract, but I guess it means like pattern detection. And the problem is like,
Right.
well,
Exactly.
doesn't AI like really pick up patterns better
It
than humans
does better than a
practically?
lot. I mean,
Yep.
yeah.
Um,
It's ultimately
Almost too
mathematically
good.
based, so.
Maybe even better than humans than picking up.
Well, especially if you combine AI with a supercomputer in the future, perhaps um, even like quantum computing, that's going to be a game changer. That'll be like a whole
Oh
nother
yeah.
when we might need to
But
worry
people
at
have
that
been
point. And had heard an interesting discussion with Michio Kaku on these ideas, and he thinks we're right now there's not m much to it, but in the future when you combine it with like quantum computing, which is a whole nother, um, animal, a whole nother beast entirely, then it's going to be something else. But I mean, okay, so as far as like, yeah, protecting it, supporting it, okay, but most people are worried about the other thing, about like the Skynet kind of scenario from like
right.
Terminator, about it taking over, it gaining consciousness, it realizing it doesn't need people and that humans are only holding it captive or holding it back, and then it turning on us. So there's this whole kind of delicate balance of how much you want to support it, how much you want to enable truly independent thinking or eventually consciousness, if you can call it that. I mean, there's a lot
And
of
remember
implications here, man. And I think
the
people are rushing into this. It's more, I feel like we're doing this because we can, and out of like curiosity, there's this basic innate drive for like curiosity and finding answers. And we're not always asking ourselves if we should be doing this or if we're putting enough safeguards in place. I mean, this happened during the nuclear program and a lot of the arms races of the 20th century. Like we weren't really thinking very far ahead when we did that. It was just in the moment because out of need and necessity. Um, and yes, there is arguably a need for this, but there's a lot of things that we got to consider, and I think they need to slow down a little bit and take it more methodically, if you ask me.
Yeah, I was going to say, even if AI doesn't have consciousness, there's probably this problem of like, well, what if we just program a super intelligent AI to just say, make as many paper clips as possible? This is like a famous philosophical thought experiment. And if it takes it literal, then it's like, okay, use all the metal on Earth, destroy all the forests, oceans, cities to just build as many paper clips as possible. And you have to prevent humans from stopping it, and then constantly make it more, improving it, and then colonize the entire planet, even the entire universe, into paper clips. And I mean, it sounds absurd, but like you're doing exactly what you tell it to do, not what it maybe what you meant it to do. And it's like that scary movie, Wishmaker, or something about genies. Like if you mess up on your wish,
Oh yeah, you got to be very
yeah, you have to
careful
be
to,
very
to be
careful
very
what you
literal and precise about what you want.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, even like the Aladdin movie, if you mess up,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, you only have three wishes, and I guess in AI's capacity, maybe you only have one wish. You have to be very precise in how you phrase it.
Well, it de depends on the context, but you can liken AI in general to kind of a genie in the bottle, and once you let it out, it's really hard to fully
Yeah,
put it back in.
I mean, and it goes back to what you mentioned at the beginning. This is like very relevant to like mythological context, not just like Homer and
Right.
Priam and Achilles, um, and like the Blade Runner people, or AIs.
Right.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, right now, a lot of people are used to just like, typing in like something like ChatGPT on their screen, but it goes way beyond that. There's like agentic AI, which now you program and give it like a framework and then like a purpose and link, various tools to it, and then you kind of just of let it go, like it just is it's up to it to kind of follow a certain goal and basically act in a way that accomplishes or achieves that goal, and that has some scary implications because like you're basically kind of letting it go. You better hope the controls that you put in place are good enough that it doesn't delete a bunch of data from your computer or your system or send a bunch of embarrassing emails or like you're allowing it to have a lot of power with these like agentic kind of systems. And of course, there's obviously a lot of good applications as well, like productivity, you know, boosting. Like if I could find a way to like see what subscriptions like for streaming I have that I don't watch based on my watch habits and then kind of automatically delete things, kind of based on that or like end, subscriptions or that would be an interesting application, for example. And you can
yeah.
kind of
There's
just
so many. I
let it
mean, it's
go.
almost
Yeah.
infinite how many
Yeah.
ways you could use it,
And
and I mean,
yeah,
it's
a lot of
probably
people
going
just
to
kind of
grow.
use it as like a Googler, but it can do so much more than that now.
Right,
There is implications of privacy, of course, as our friend often talks about, our friend Roman, because
right.
now like you can download them. There's multiple ways, so you can run them from the command line interface of your computer, but still use like the main ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude model. In that case, it has access to your local computer files, and that can be kind of scary. I don't know if I'm a fan of using it that way, but I might still play around with it. Um, then there's the other way, the purely local kind of way of doing it that a lot of enthusiasts have been doing. You download something from like Hugging Face, something like Olama, for example, or Mistral or DeepSeek, which is the Chinese one that actually beat ChatGPT a while back. Also, Quen's another good one. So what you do is you download this model on your computer, and then it doesn't really talk to the internet. It doesn't phone home to like Google or Microsoft or OpenAI or whatever. It just stays on your system. Of course, you need a very good graphics card and stuff like that to kind of make it work, but that's one way I recommend, if you're not too well versed with this, I recommend doing that if you're into privacy and
And
whatnot.
Mistral is based in France, so it's subject to
Right,
European
right.
Union
Yeah, which is better
regulations.
than, the
Yeah,
American. Um, but yeah, not everybody has the option to really fully make use of that, but it's something to think about. But I mean, we're already feeding tons of information to it. I mean, our metadata is out there. It has access to so much. So
Oh yeah, I'm sure like you got to think about it like the same way that you've heard like Google can like predict what you think since
yeah,
2010. I mean like even you and I play video games sometimes. I have no doubt every click we make and stuff like that is metadata that's collected and they're seeing how we learn, how we get better at video games, how our brain functions. They can make
yep,
correlations and predictions. And that's just something fun and something you think is like so innocent, but they're really learning a lot from you.
yep,
And that's what's fascinating and
yeah,
scary at the same time.
yeah. I mean, it's embedded in like everything now, so it's kind of hard to escape it unless you're complete like
Right,
paranoid privacy nut. But
right,
which we know
right.
some people who are. But and I'm
I
I'm
mean, it has its benefits, right? And I
yeah.
mean, those people are definitely ahead of the curve.
Absolutely,
A lot of
yeah. And
things,
like in
yeah.
5 years, people who are not careful might be regretting it, but
Right.
that's the whole that could be another discussion. But
Oh,
um,
indeed, yeah, yeah.
what was I going to say? So it's interesting though. I've heard that in recent iterations of ChatGPT, so like the 5.0 was kind of underwhelming compared to like the jump from 3 to 4, I'll be honest. But I heard that they're trying to focus more on like internally refining it as opposed to training it on like a lot of like outside internet data. Like it's already trained on like, an insane amount of data, and now they're working more on like training on AI generated data. So it's kind of feeding it its responses and metadata from interactions back into itself to kind of refine itself. That seems to be the strategy, I guess, that the
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah,
OpenAI is
I mean,
pursuing.
I know that 5.1 of ChatGPT has been released, and I mean, of course, we have. I haven't been following what's going on with DeepSeek or the Mistral. I've played around with Mistral a little bit in Grok, and
Yeah,
a little
Grok.
even
Grok is
less.
kind of a mess, man. I don't know. It's not great.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. I just played around with it, and I played a little bit with Claude as well. I've never used DeepSeek.
You tried Sora AI for like the video and image generation and stuff.
Oh, I looked at stuff like there. I've never really like requested anything to be built there, but my understanding is that's kind of built into Chat GPT.
Yeah, but especially like the paid versions, like they make more use of it.
Oh, okay. So all right. Yeah, well, I mean, I know that there's like Canva and like there's like a lot of different GPTs out there that can help you. I mean, I have, yeah. I mean, I wonder if this is going to take a lot of jobs that are based in writing. I don't think it's there yet.
Not quite,
At
but
least not publicly
yeah.
available there yet. But I mean, like, because when it came out, I remember I had a friend. He's like, "Well, all law jobs are going to disappear," and I mean that hasn't happened yet because in my experience, it's just it's not there, but it could be.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it'll take like obviously more technical jobs, especially like kind of lower level technical jobs. The automation it does is definitely kind of, impinging on that sector. Um,
yeah,
Creative stuff, I mean, it's not quite there yet, but it's getting there. It's definitely helping people write, cover letters, resumes, that kind of stuff. So it's taking the place of traditional, ability to
yeah,
write, which
copy
is
editors
a,
and things like that. Yeah, I think
double-edged
that I
sword for
remember
them.
I'd read this again. I was reading this Yoval Noah Harari book,
Yeah.
but one of his books that I read before this was Homo Deus, and he was talking about, or maybe it was 21 Problems for the 21st Century, and he was talking about how, jobs like archaeologists probably aren't going to be taken by AI because it's like so there is no set. Like when you're digging something up, you have to be extremely careful. You're constantly shifting. You're
At
using
least
like a
for now, unless they
yeah
make
a
like
tiny brush.
actual robots with very fine motor
That might be
control.
true as
Yeah.
well. I mean, but I think people would be scared that what if it misinterprets a bone for a rock or something or like
Right.
a tool and then messes it
Yeah.
up? I
They
mean,
better hope
it's
that it's a very good system.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like in the 1800s, like when they were excavating in Greece and Turkey, I mean, they messed up a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and it's not because I think they
I,
intended to do that. It's just the tools at the
yeah.
time led them in
I
that
get it.
direction.
But so what about things like therapy is an interesting one because like a lot of people are using these
Yes.
things as like kind of like a makeshift informal therapist. And in the latest versions, like they are actually pretty decent. Like I'm surprised by like if you give it enough data, it can kind of pick like, you know, themes and currents and trends in the way you do things and even like kind of analyze like your subconscious and like like the kind of reading between the lines of what you give it and how you interact with it. I mean, it's not. I wouldn't say it takes a place fully of like a in-person, therapist or psychologist, of course, but for like certain things that you're having trouble understanding and frustrations people might have, it can be useful and it's like a free alternative. Well, free,
Right. I would say impersonally it's not as good. But
right.
it is a really great supplement. My worry is it's just like giving it information and like again, you're
Yeah,
taking
it
your
goes back to the
privacy out
privacy. Yeah.
there and maybe somebody else's privacy. I mean, like here's this Nexus book again. It said in theory, a priest or a rabbi or I guess an imam doing uh, a a ritualistic marriage is easy. You just read some words, but it's not the same. Like you don't
Right.
go to a computer to get married, even though a computer could read the same words. Like, do you take this woman to be your
Yeah,
wife?
it's not. Yeah, I get it.
You want that human connection with like
Yeah.
someone ordained who's like ordained or someone you trust and you have like some sort of
Well,
connection.
that's
um
with the assumption that you trust them and that you think they actually care about you, which for a lot of them it's just like work. It's just business.
I mean, I actually prefer it. I mean, especially in therapy, I'd hope that they don't get too wrapped up
Yeah,
in our
yeah,
problems and they're
yeah.
freaking out about them. I mean, um, but it is interesting, and that point resonated with me about the priest or like doing the wedding. Yeah, I mean, AI could do the wedding, but I don't want a computer to like do something so important in my life. I want it to be human
Oh,
to
well,
human.
no, yeah,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Um,
No.
even if you don't know that priest that well, or like the officiant, it could be anyone. It could be a judge, could be like, someone who just did that, the certificates online to get ordained or whatnot.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, but again, it goes back to like consciousness. I mean, you and I before this podcast were talking about Ghost in the Shell, right? And that might be an interesting thought as we're kind of wrapping things up to kind of reminisce on Ghost in the Shell.
Right. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
in general, just the idea of like consciousness from this stuff is interesting because of the implications it has about our own consciousness and how similar or different we actually are to it. This guy in this article that toward the end talks about like how um there are some uncomfortable potential implications from exploring too in depth our own consciousness and how it functions and operates because it kind of breaks it down to the point where there's no longer any wonder about it. And at that point, like, are we really even unique if we can have a computer or machine, be an analog or, to emulate what we do essentially? Then what are we? We just happen to be a biological version of it. And there's other stuff that can, do the same thing in its own analogous parallel kind of way. Which, that can be very unsettling and uncomfortable for some people because, like, what does that say about us? Like,
Right, right. No, I hear you. I mean, it is unsettling, and it just goes to the question of consciousness. Like, if you have intersubjective experience or inner awareness, like, how does that separate you? And I guess I don't know. I guess like obviously going back to the thing we brought up at the beginning, consciousness has just never been explained even before AI to
that's a good
to
point.
most
Yeah.
people's satisfaction, and like whether there's a ghost in the shell, like the noose being the ghost, the noetic thing, or the psyche or the soma, which is the
Yeah.
body in ancient Greek. I mean, it's unclear, and I mean a lot of things are up in the air. And like if AGI comes out, which we kind of briefly alluded to, that's going to change things. But even the definitions of AGI that I've read don't necessarily say or prove that that would be sentience as well.
Mm.
Um, and so just because it's processing all this data, I mean, doesn't mean that it's necessarily sentient, feeling
Yeah, but
emotions. I mean,
where do you draw the line? I mean, are what animals are sentient versus which are not? It's kind of arbitrary
it
ultimately.
is really hard because when you look in like, I would say in most mammals, like eyes, you really feel like, I mean, you look into like a dog's eyes or a cat's
Yeah.
eyes or I don't know, even, a hippo, something silly and cute like that. I mean, I'm not saying that they're solving mathematical equations, but they do have like a lot of emotion, I would say. And I mean,
Of
monkeys,
their own sort. I think people have a tendency to anthropomorphize a little bit, but yeah, I agree.
right, right. But I think like primates, probably are the closest to having like logical,
Right.
and probably
Primates,
these
maybe
snow monkeys.
dolphins. But
Oh yeah, dolphins as well, right? I mean, you and I have swam with
right,
dolphins
right.
actually. Funny enough, memory. I didn't predict bringing that up into the conversation, but
Wild
yeah, I
animals.
mean, dolphins are known to be like intelligent creatures. Um, I mean, it's funny you say this. The only country I believe in the world that's given habeas corpus rights, which is the most basic, like fundamental human right to any animal, was in Spain in the Canary Islands, I believe.
Hmm. Interesting.
They gave habeas corpus to gorillas that were living on those islands,
Hmm.
and that was probably 10 years ago or more.
I mean, that's kind of a step and that sets a precedent, right?
Yeah, I mean, the question is like, okay, we give them because I think they were being mistreated or something. So I mean, it
Right,
probably it
right.
probably had like other, it wasn't just a philosophical exercise. But yeah, I mean, I guess like the question is like, what happens if we need to give habeas corpus to AI, and then like, how do we do that? Because like, it's not really contained in anything. Like,
That's the thing. Like, where do
do we
you
just
and
carry
there's so many
around like
different
like a hard drive?
models and yeah, there's a lot of questions.
A lot of questions. I guess that's how we can wrap it up, right? A
Yeah,
lot of questions.
indeed. Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much more that could be discussed on this topic. This is like just barely
I know we
scratching.
talked about Aristotle, we talked about the Turing test, the Chinese room problem, the Turing test, the paperclip, Mistral, DeepSeek, ChatGPT. I mean, these are we even mentioned Dune and Foundation. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on all these
Yeah.
things in relation to AI.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, um, I guess it just remains to see how much it'll, continue impacting our lives, our relationships in some cases, with people who are actually like in love with their AI, and friendships, work, our ability to, perceive the world, even self-driving cars and things like that, and how I mean, there's so many more, things to contend with and how AI will evolve. So like I think right now this year is a turning point, both politically and technologically. We're on the cusp of some new era, essentially. And it's just a strange time to be alive. I don't think we're going to fully appreciate how much change is going to happen starting around now as, AI begins to snowball, more and more. So I guess, we're just along for the ride and hope we don't get left behind, you
We're
know.
riding the wave. We're
Yeah,
riding the
hopefully,
wave.
Terminator and Skynet,
Yeah, yeah.
we'll
A lot
see.
of
A lot of
questions.
questions. Anyway,
All right.
guys, thank you for watching this episode. If you have any, comments, let us know, like, subscribe, and
Like, comment, and subscribe, please.
we'll see you next time.